Welcome to our third edition of our Remesh video cast, where today we're going to talk about the future of work. So we're about 10 seconds to get started, so we're going to get ready to go and start talking to a group of people. We should have about 40 to 50 people online today, and we're going to kind of follow through a script here. So first, we're just going to kind of welcome everyone to the group, get them familiar with all the ground rules and instructions that they're going to need to do for this session, and then give them a second to read all of that. But today's conversation is going to be about the future of work. We're going to talk specifically around the on-demand economy, or the gig economy, as it's called. Get people's perspective of, now that that's here, what would they have done differently to prepare themselves for that, as well as just general thoughts around where it's going and what needs to be done to be more sustainable, in fact. So, but first, we're just going to make sure everyone's ready to go, has read all of the instructions, and is excited to talk about the future of work. So first question out, giving them a quick poll to the group, just asking if they're ready to start. We'll find out in 22 seconds if they are ready. I believe usually we get pretty high percentage of people that are ready to go on this question, but we do want to ask just to make sure everyone knows, hey, we're getting ready to start talking. But yes. And as they're finishing that up, I am going to give them a warm-up question. We've got 100% that are yes, absolutely ready to go. So we're going to give this warm-up question. Today's warm-up question is, if you were stranded on a desert island, what 3 items would you want to have with you? A little bit different before. Other times we've asked, kind of, tell me about something, what side of you, of an issue that you're on, such as are you a dog or cat person, or if you're from a certain state, why that state is the best state in the country. Today's question is around desert island. So far, firewood seems to be important. Now coming up with cell phone with reception, food for a week, and a tent. Not sure what happens after that week. Hopefully, airplane, pilot, runway. That is good. Perhaps I should have given some limitations to the size of things you could have brought. Airplane, pilot, runway seems like a good thing to have if stranded on a desert island. So as the participants are going through this, we're starting to get a sense of kind of what they're thinking, what the top things are from the group, what other things are coming through, so that we can already start to think about the next question that we're going to go through to be able to start to frame it if go through it. As we're waiting for that, 15 seconds left, we are going to shift into the questions around the future of work. So as we're waiting for that, and good. Send that off to the group. And our first question, we're going to ask that for 2 minutes. So first question, with so many jobs moving to an on-demand, or what people are calling the gig economy jobs, what do you wish you would have done differently 5 years ago to prepare? Is what we're going to ask the group here. So I'm very curious to see what they would have said, if there's from an education standpoint, or just preparation otherwise, or just anything creative that comes from the group around what they would have done 5 years ago to prepare. Learn to code, I believe, is what that means. We got another one on learn to code, invest in better technology. Could be learn to code, so I could be balling like Bill Gates. So lots of things around coding, studying. Definitely a lot around computer code and computer skills. I think I'm going to ask, if, like, kind of based on that, I'm going to ask a quick question around on the fly here. Is, do you feel like education systems in the U.S. are ahead or behind in teaching coding skills. Say ahead. Cool. Cool. So learning more computer skills, coding are kind of the top responses. So we're just going to ask a quick conversation there, a question around that, kind of follow up. We kind of learned a little bit about what the group was saying, learning more computer skills, learning how to code, learning more computer programming, make a gig economy app and cash in on the trend early. Good idea. So all related to that focus on coding and computer skills. I'm just going to kind of shift the conversation a little bit, make it a little different than what we planned on it based on that kind of initial feedback from the group and really get into people think that it's behind in terms of our education system. Why? This is kind of an interesting question. I'm not sure everyone's going to have a large insight into that, but just curious to ask. But yeah, I think there's a lot. There is one person total that said that they think that the U.S. is ahead in terms of the education systems for learning and teaching coding skills, whereas the vast majority think that we're behind, which I think fits with a lot of what's going on and what we see in the kind of gap in STEM type of education and careers and people in the U.S. So far there's a focus on corruption and focus strongly on traditional education and so forth. Well, that's going to be my last question kind of on the ad hoc side here. I'm going to shift into a little bit of what some of the next questions were that we were going to ask. Give them some... Right. So I'm going to be curious. One of the things that we can do, because we asked that poll question around whether they think they're ahead, behind, or right where they need to be, I'm curious to see what the people that think they're behind versus where they think it is need to be, what they're saying about that after we ask this next question. So, cool. All right, next question we're going to ask is, what do you think is the most important change that would make these gig economy jobs more sustainable in the future? So some talk around the fact that there's maybe not as many benefits, there's not as predictive or consistent. So looking at, like, as we're shifting to a larger percentage of people doing these type of jobs, how do we make these sustainable going forward? So curious to hear what people said. But before we do, really just going to look into some of the questions, the question that we asked just before of, why do they think the education is behind? So one, I'm going to quickly look at that question that we asked around the poll and say, all right, what people that said it was right where they need to be, what did they say? So only about 4 participants, a low number. Still, there's a focus on the public school system needs a total overhaul. So even these people that say that they thought it was right where it needs to be, still thinks that there are issues to be addressed there. Obviously, on the people ahead, there are no real comments on that versus behind. We're definitely going to see that just not a focus placed on in early education and so forth. And check in with where we're at on the current question. Contracts and guaranteed incomes for gig workers, better technology. better platforms that take more reasonable fees, so less fees from that. But like a lot of this kind of the theme up top here around just providing more consistency around the incomes versus it just being such a flux up and down, which I think is a good point. Got about 24 seconds left on that question. Gonna even go back into this last thing around the education side. So going back in there, I want to also see, is there a specific group of people that think a little bit differently here? So we're doing a little bit of segment analysis here. And you can kind of see it kind of breaks down into some smaller group that thinks just the system is corrupt and don't really trust it in some ways. And then you have another group here that just thinks many schools strongly focus on traditional education. So the maths, the science, the social studies, and so forth. I think some people argue that computer science and computer coding should be its own subject and should be a priority in what's in the curriculum of schools today. Next question we're going to ask is, if someone said that these jobs are just a fad, what is your argument to disagree with them? So kind of going back, see if there's any other interesting points from that last question. What do you think is the most important change that would make these gig economy jobs more sustainable in the future? Again, that top answer, which was pretty consistent across from the beginning around this contracts and guaranteed incomes, better pay and levels for good workers. That's actually a really interesting point. Like, just like normal like salary type of positions, as you become better and more kind of proficient in your job, you get promoted, you move up. And so does that then translate into the gig economy as well? That as you get better at your job, as you're maybe higher rated, do you then reach another level in terms of income and pay and so forth? Is that something that can be implemented and shown there, that people are not just being incentivized for volume and the quality more from as long as you hit this quality level that you're not going to get kicked off, but really as a motivator for more or higher rates and higher pay. So looks like some interesting facts around this kind of like whether this gig economy is a fad. The fad has been growing exponentially over the past few years with no end in sight. If it's just a fad, more and more people wouldn't keep doing it. I think that's definitely growing. You can see a lot of other companies that are driving that. So I'm going to ask them now, just like, do you believe that this is a fad? So very cool. Kind of looking at, if someone said that these jobs are just a fad, then the internet must also be a fad. Looking at companies are going to want more ways to pay less and get more work. It's a trend, not a fad. Some interesting points there. Again, going to see if there's anything kind of quickly from a segment, different groups of people. Looks like there's a pretty big split here across these two groups. You have a group of clustered people here. And just in terms of the fad has been growing exponentially over the past few years with no end in sight, then versus the advance of technology that's driving that. Cool. All right. So I'm going to ask basically one question to them, which is ask them if they have any questions they want to ask the group before we head off. So I'm going to kind of put the ball in their court and switch it up a little bit and see if there's anything that anyone else wants to ask, and I'll take a interesting question from the group to then ask the group before we head out. So looks like very much so that the people that talking about the on-demand jobs being a fad, 93% say no, it is not a fad. So that's very, very strong. Interested to see, like, to the last question, any interesting points from people that say it is a fad. See if anything comes up. I think it's going to be a low number. It's good. So companies don't have the workers' best interests at heart and will try to get people to doing gigs. They're probably right. Robots will do a lot of these jobs. Cool. Back, see what other questions people are asking. Are you happy with performing your work? What is the economics will going? What should I have for lunch? All right, so the first one is, why did you start Turking? So the group of people we're talking to are around their participants in a community called Amazon Mechanical Turk. So I'm going to ask that. So. Cool. That'll be our last question for today. Looks like someone thought just very bland, very kind of to the point to make money. Well, not on a schedule. Found interesting. Help supplement income. Very straightforward responses to that. So definitely driven. So these people are in what you could consider the gig economy, where they're on-demand workers online through the Mechanical Turk community. And so in that way, it's interesting just seeing the motivation. So make income on the side while pursuing dreams, to sometimes the flexibility just to pay bills, using your own schedule, making your own time with that. Different comments around that. So, cool. We are coming to an end of today's conversation. So after this timer runs out, we're going to give them a thanks for participating today and kind of go on our way. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching the video and looking at the different conversations around the future of work. Interested to dive in this a little bit more. But in the meantime, have a great day.